So I need some more books, the first time for a new Bookhunt video. This time I'm going to Copenhagen city in Denmark and I'm going to Stall, or as it was called in the old days, Ruten, the road. And I'm going to as many bookstores as I can with the time that I have. Mostly I'm going to antique stores because I actually want to end up buying some books this time. Because I don't like paying full price for the books that I'm looking for. And I've made a book list of 5 books that I'm going to look for again. And the final question is going to be the same as the last Bookhunt video. I'm going to see if they have any books or not from Mr. Kierkegaard. But this time I'm going to look for books of him being a student, because I'm really curious about that. And of course every video has uncertainty. This video has the most of it. So I'm really excited to see what I end up filming. Both Mr. Kierkegaard and Hans Christian Andersen lies buried in Assistens Cemetery. The first book about Hans Christian Andersen, called From the Papers of One Still Living, from 1838, was the first book written by Mr. Kierkegaard, a book that in its truly direct way do not seem to be present in the point of view for my work as an author in 1859. They both had their funeral in the same church of Our Lady, two very different kinds of funeral, one in its continuous world's excellence at the time, a walking popularity and the higher social class showed up, another one in its continuous decrease of the world's excellence at the time, a walking unpopularity, and the church was filled up by sleazy-looking people amongst the youth marching to the coffin. A individuality that remained a reality, dreaming of an individuality in its whole, a individuality for everyone in its purest form of reality. But there were at least one person from higher social classes that attended Mr. Kierkegaard's funeral, and that person was Hans Christian Andersen. And why did he do that, if all he cared about was his continuous world's excellence showing up to an individual in continuous decrease of that? What does this has to say of him and his personal character, and what does this has to say of Mr. Kierkegaard and his funeral, both literally and symbolic in both occasions? The first book on the list is A Brief History of Thought, a philosophical guide to living from 1996, written by Luc Ferry, a philosopher and a lot more from France. The reason I want to look for this work of him is because a year ago I also went looking for books and found another book of him, also written in 1996. So it therefore might be symbolic for me to read this book as well. The book that I found around a year ago is in French called Le Homédiolescence de la Vie, something like this. I am not good at French, so this is just a guess, I guess. But in English, The Human God or Life's Meaning. And I was truly pleased reading this work, and therefore ever since been trying to find other works of him in antique stores. The second book on the list is Emile, or An Education, from 1762 by Rousseau. This work fell into my recommendation, likewise the previous book that I found written by Luc Ferry a year ago, because Rousseau is mentioned in some extent, especially a bit that goes somewhat like this, that no human should seek the cause for evil, because that cause is yourself. There exists no other form of evil other than what you create, and so on, which is a truly amazing piece of thinking that involves many different kinds of intellectual disciplines, and therefore I want to read this work and to elaborate a little with thinking that came afterwards. No matter how much evil you have experienced and been put through in life, life is a choice. Your choice to inflict that pain, evil on other people. If you take away man's free will, then what is left? Of course, a difficult saying, thinking of every person's unconsciousness reactions, that doesn't take away one's free will. But to say this in its most harsh reality, a classical saying today would be, no matter how much you were beat up as a kid by your parents, it's always going to be your choice to do the exact same to your kids when you one day will have kids. And an even more tragic free will evil, when it's random people that gets to be the victim. An example could be a dad that lost his daughter in a car accident, feeling deep pain, then the next day starts shooting random people, and so on. A more divine saying of this could be Jesus, an eye for an eye, then we are going to have no eyes and we are going to be equally blind, so we are both going to be losers. And a more divine way to deal with this as well could be my other #1 video, where I talked about turning, completely destroying the evil and the suffering by turning it into something good instead. How would Gandhi make an interpretation of this saying? Perhaps staying yourself and therefore earning respect. The third book on the list is actually no specific book yet. Well, I'm looking for a biography of Gandhi, but I don't trust the biography genre, especially not when it's written about any of the true greats. And when it comes to Gandhi, I'm even more clueless of which book to get, because a previous biography of him was banned in part of India, portraying him as being bisexual, perhaps homosexual, and so on. So I don't necessarily trust this genre anymore for several reasons. I mean, this biographical book of him is even referred as the gay Gandhi book. Truly, this whole situation truly ridiculous. Therefore, I'm just gonna see what I can find and take it from there. The fourth and the fifth book on the list is two books written by Carl Jung, Psychological Types from 1921 and The Undiscovered Self, Present and Future from 1957. One thing I forgot to mention when I was talking about Luke Ferry is that he is not only discussing evil in his whole in The Human God or Life's Meaning, but is also discussing this in his work The New Ecological Order, which come close to what I talked about in book review 3 about Ronald D. Lang, about love, a lack of love in human biology, Konrad Lorenz and his work on aggression, so-called evil, which might all be connected. You could definitely find connections between these works. And what is there to say about Carl Jung and these two books that I want to find a lot, but I haven't read them yet, and a classical Bookhunt video is gonna include books I haven't read. So let's just continue without saying too much other than this. That I want to read the more works of Carl Jung. So these two books of him might be a good place to start. The reason why I want to look for books of him being a student is very simple, because most people's idea of a genius is someone that gets the best grade in every matter. But if you're truly a genius, you don't follow along the tradition. You become your own, you make a whole new genre, and so on. Is this the case with Mr. Kierkegaard? Probably, but even though it took him many years to finish his exams, if that's even true, or maybe it was more normal back then, he wasn't necessarily a horrible student. But I've heard some funny examples of the opposite. One example could be where he once, instead of writing his assignment normally, he would write a whole assignment about why he didn't like the question of the assignment to be written. So how was he really like being a student in his youth? That's what I want to find out. But of course, this is a troubling saying. The academic scholars and with their academic discipline, of course, have tried to push him into that tradition. And when I talk about tradition, if you're a little confused, what I mean is simply this: that to put him into the tradition, especially of being a theologist. But the problem with Mr. Kierkegaard is that he was a lot more than that, because he was a genius. So he falls into many other thinking disciplines, academics disciplines as well. So yeah, because he was a genius, people still want him to fall into that category, and of course they want to do it in a theologian manner. And again, when I say tradition, what I mean is because of this guy before Mr. Kierkegaard said this, therefore now Mr. Kierkegaard is saying this, and so on. So they're trying to make step by step tradition, better and better progressing. But the case with genius is the complete opposite. They don't fall into the tradition. They're genius, so they have their genius thought that has nothing to do with tradition. And when they die, or if they do it themselves, they try to make this thought into the tradition, of course, so they can be understood in better ways. And when they die, if this thought of thinking is not a part of the tradition, what the academic scholars would do is trying to push them into that and say, because he only said this because this other person said this 1,000 years before him or her, and so on. Therefore, he was thinking this, but that's not the case with most genius people, because their thoughts is coming out of the blue and they see something no one else see, and therefore when they die, people trying to push them into some tradition that they don't necessarily belong to. Of course, with in Mr. Kierkegaard's case, you could definitely find people before him saying something similar, and therefore like a police detective, even Kierkegaard would say this. you could try and understand that because of this, therefore he thought this and so on, because he's a human like every one of us. But the thing with genius is that it's very difficult. It becomes very, very difficult when they say something and then try and make it into the puzzle of your academic discipline, because it does not always fit in, and that's of course what is frustrating to most people, because most people are robots. They have no original thought of their own at all. All they do is what other people are doing. It's really like robots. It's like they're programmed to not have any sort of free will. And whenever a few people like Mr. Kierkegaard comes to life, they either crucify them or kill them by poisoning them, or they beat them up and so on, because they can't seem to rationally understand where this thought piece came from. And when they do and try to push that into some tradition, or even with Jesus and other geniuses around history, they try to understand what are they talking about, and they can't do it. They can't simply make the piece fall together, and they get so frustrated. So, since the video has almost come to an end, I want to address the video in its whole, and therefore I want to say that did I buy any books on the book list, or did I end up buying some other books instead? The first thing I want to say is that I really enjoy filming this video, even though it's only the second one in this genre, but I like it because of this uncertainty that I don't always know what I'm gonna end up filming. And I hope you enjoyed the connection I tried to make between Hans Christian Andersen and Mr. Kierkegaard. And the video footage was from Assistance Cemetery. And there was a great, there was a lot of people in the city that day when I was walking, so it was really nice. There was a Christmas market where you could get something to drink and eat. And did I buy any books on the book list? Sadly, I did not, but I found two other books. I found this one about Marxism that is pretty beat up, but it's a grand book on that, and I need to read a little more of this. So, not that interesting a book, but it's a good place to start. And then I found this book, which I'm really happy for, by Konrad Lorenz, on aggression, so-called evil. And that's really amazing that I found this book. And both books were not that expensive, because I found them in antique stores, so that's even better. And yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say.